Hello, welcome to Unbelievable Tales.
A soaked baby blanket, a forgotten bottle, and a woman who didn't even flinch when a CEO's limo drenched her on the worst night of her life. Juliette Shade wasn't looking for help. She was just trying to get her daughter home one cold street at a time. But Shaun Renard, silent, polished, and untouchable, stepped out of that car and saw something he wasn't ready for. A mother's strength, a child's trust, and the kind of quiet dignity money can't erase. What started as a careless splash would become the first crack in the walls he'd spent years building, and the beginning of a love neither of them saw coming. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Juliet had walked this road 100 times. Always the same cracked pavement. Always the same broken streetlight above the corner store. Always the same sharp wind that caught the bottom of her coat and tugged at her scarf like a spoiled child wanting attention. But tonight, something was different. The rain had come suddenly, angry, sideways, relentless. Her shoes were already soaked through. The stroller wheels squeaked as she pushed through puddles, whispering soft apologies to the tiny bundle wrapped inside. "Almost home, baby," she murmured. "Just a few more blocks. You're okay." Little Lila stirred beneath the damp fleece blanket but didn't cry. She rarely did. Too used to discomfort already. Juliet adjusted her hood and glanced down the empty street. Not a soul in sight. No headlights. No taxis. Just the city, yawning and cold and unaware of her existence. Until the limo came. It was black, sleek, and silent like a panther gliding out of nowhere. She barely noticed it until it turned the corner too fast and rolled through a gutter-wide puddle, sending a wave of cold water directly onto them. The splash was instant, violent, shocking. Lila let out a small whimper. Juliet gasped, shielding the stroller with her arms. Her own coat clung to her like a second skin. Hair plastered to her face. Rain in her eyes, her mouth, her soul. She looked up. The limo had slowed. Of course it had. The back door opened. Slowly. And from behind the tinted glass stepped a man in a dark wool coat and charcoal scarf. Shaun Renard. She didn't recognize him right away. To her, he was just another expensive silhouette in the dark. But the way he stood still, alert, controlled, said everything. A man who never had to apologize. A man who probably hadn't gotten wet in a decade. I'm sorry," he said, his voice low but clear over the rain. He sounded like someone who didn't say those words often. Juliet blinked at him, water running down her cheeks. "I don't need your apology," she replied, adjusting Lila's blanket again. "I just need her to stay warm." Shaun's brows drew together. He stepped closer before stopping himself. "She's a baby." Juliet gave a dry smile. "Excellent observation." His gaze flicked down to the soaked child, then back to the woman who stood like armor in the rain. "Let me drive you home," he said suddenly. Juliet stared. "What?" "I caused this," he said plainly. "Let me help." The rain dripped from his hair onto his collar. He didn't flinch. Juliet looked at the limo, then at her daughter, then at him. Everything in her screamed no. But her daughter shivered. She exhaled. "Fine. But no weird questions, no speeches, and if your driver has an attitude, I'm walking." Shaun almost smiled. "Almost? Deal." The inside of the car was warm. Soft leather, polished wood, the faint scent of something expensive and genderless. Juliet sat stiffly, cradling Lila against her chest. Shaun slid in across from her, pressing a towel into her hands. She hesitated, then took it. "What's her name?" he asked after a moment. "Lila." "How old?" 10 months. He nodded. Said nothing else. Just watched the child as if she were more interesting than any quarterly report he'd ever read. Juliet unwrapped the blanket slowly, checking her daughter's tiny face. Lila looked up at her mother, blinked, and reached for her necklace. A sign she was okay. She kissed her daughter's forehead. "Brave girl." Shaun's eyes softened slightly. "She didn't cry. She never does," Juliet said, not looking at him. She knows no one's coming. The car rolled forward. City lights moved across the windows. For a long time, silence sat between them, thick, electric, almost reverent. Finally, Juliette turned to him. So what were you running from when you hit that puddle? A board meeting on fire. He actually chuckled, low and reluctant. Almost. I was leaving one. Figures, she said. People like you always seem to be rushing somewhere important. People like me? She met his eyes. People with drivers, and coats that cost more than my rent. A pause. You're not wrong, he said simply. That stopped her. No defense. No arrogance. Just truth. Juliette looked away. The car slowed at a red light. Turn left on Morrow, she said to the driver. Then 2 blocks down. Shaun didn't ask questions. Didn't offer to cover expenses or send someone. When they reached her apartment building, old brick, 3 floors, no elevator, he opened the door and got out first, then offered to help with the stroller. Juliette raised an eyebrow. You're not seriously going to carry that up? He shrugged. Rain's already ruined my night. Might as well go all in. She cracked a smile. It wasn't much, but it was the first smile of her day. Juliette's building smelled like old wood, rain, and quiet lives lived behind thin walls. The hallway lights flickered overhead as she unlocked the door, pushing it open with her hip while cradling Lila against her shoulder. Shaun followed, stroller in hand. He didn't speak, just stepped over the peeling threshold and into a world that didn't know suits, boardrooms, or glass elevators. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom, the kind of kitchen that turned with you if you spun too fast. But it was warm, lived in. A string of paper stars hung above the cracked window. On the table sat a plastic dinosaur, a chipped mug full of pencils, and a folded drawing with the word Mama scrawled in red crayon. Shaun didn't stare, but he noticed everything. You can put the stroller by the door, Juliette said. Thanks. I mean, for not just driving away like most people would. I wasn't raised that way. She raised an eyebrow as she slipped off her coat. No? You sure look like someone raised to keep the windows rolled up. Shaun tilted his head. And you look like someone who's used to being ignored. Her eyes narrowed. Touché, she murmured. He stepped back toward the door. I'll go. Didn't mean to intrude. You didn't. She sighed. Lila's bottle. She looked down. It's gone. I must have dropped it in the car. I'll have it cleaned and returned, he said instinctively, then paused. Or I can bring it back myself. She blinked. Why? A long beat. I don't really know. For the first time, she looked at him. Not as the man who soaked her in gutter water or the polished CEO in a designer coat, but as a person. There was something hollow around the edges of his eyes, something quiet and cracked. Juliette wrapped Lila in dry blankets and gently set her in the crib beside the sofa. Do you want coffee? She asked suddenly. Or are you one of those herbal detox CEOs who can only drink liquid quartz or whatever? He smiled, caught off guard. I'd kill for bad coffee. 10 minutes later, they sat across from each other at the wobbly kitchen table. The mugs were mismatched. Hers said, "Don't talk to me before 9." His had a faded cartoon owl. Juliette wrapped her hands around her cup. She never cries, she said quietly. My daughter. She just watches everything. She's like you. Juliette laughed, soft and tired. Is that a compliment? It's an observation, he said, then added, a respectful one. She studied him. Why are you really here? Shaun hesitated. I don't know. I got in the car tonight thinking about deadlines, acquisitions, profit margins. And then he looked toward the crib. There you were, standing in the rain like the world owed you nothing and you owed it even less. Juliette didn't respond right away. Then, it doesn't. The world doesn't owe me anything. He nodded once. But I owe her everything, she finished, glancing at Lila. There it was. The reason her hands trembled but never dropped the child. The reason her smile was small but unbreakable. Shaun didn't say much after that. He sat a little longer, sipping her bitter coffee like it mattered, like it warmed something deeper than his bones. Eventually, he stood. I'll return the bottle tomorrow, he said. Sure. She leaned against the doorframe. But if you're expecting me to be impressed, I'm not. I've had men return things before just to get their foot back in the door. I don't want to impress you, Shaun replied. I think I just want to see what happens when someone doesn't try to. That apparently was the right thing to say, because Juliette didn't close the door right away. And when she did, it was soft. The next morning, Shaun walked into his penthouse and didn't go straight to his desk. Instead, he stood in the foyer for a full minute, still in his coat, holding a tiny pink baby bottle like it was made of glass. His housekeeper, Miriam, passed by. Sir, he cleared his throat. Don't clean the car. There's a bottle inside. I'm taking it somewhere later. She looked at him, looked at the bottle, said nothing. Back in her apartment, Juliette was folding laundry when Lila suddenly laughed. Unprovoked, bright, a burst of something joyful. She turned, startled. Where'd that come from? She whispered. Lila grinned, grabbed her stuffed rabbit, and gurgled again. It hit Juliette like a train. Her daughter had smiled more last night than she had in weeks. She didn't know what that meant, didn't want to think about it, but the thought stuck like a thorn between her ribs, and somehow it didn't hurt. The next evening, just after sunset, someone knocked at her door. She opened it to find Shaun standing there. Dressed down, no suit, no driver, holding the bottle in one hand and something else in the other. Paperback book. Stories for Sleepless Nights. She left this in the car too, he said. Juliette blinked. No, she didn't. I know. He offered a small smile. I just thought maybe she'd like it anyway. Juliette stepped aside. Fine. But no more books unless you're reading them out loud. He hesitated. Deal. By the time he left that night, Lila was asleep again, and so was part of Shaun, the part that had screamed in silence for years, the part that thought he didn't deserve second chances. He walked out into the rain without opening his umbrella. Didn't need it. Something inside him was already thawing. The following week arrived in pieces. Little moments, quiet rhythms. Shaun stopped showing up in suits. Juliette started putting on coffee for two. Lila squealed when he knocked. It was strange how quickly something unfamiliar became routine. How she found herself checking the window when it rained, as if expecting headlights. How he, renowned for answering emails at 4 a.m., began silencing his phone after 8 p.m., just in case Lila was asleep. He never overstayed. He never assumed. Not at first. But then came the groceries. It started with a delivery. A large box on her doorstep, fresh fruit, formula, baby wipes, even coffee filters. No note, no name, but she knew. Juliette frowned. She hadn't asked for help. The next day it was a new stroller. Lightweight, fancy, silent wheels. Then came a message. Shaun, I saw the wheels sticking on the sidewalk yesterday. Thought this one might glide better. Just an idea. She didn't answer. Then came the envelope under her door. A prepaid childcare card for 3 months at a certified daycare across town. And that was too far. Juliette sat in the kitchen, staring at the card. It wasn't just a gift. It was a shift in tone. A line being crossed. He thought he was helping. She felt like she was being handled. That evening, when Shaun knocked on her door, she didn't open it right away. When she finally did, her expression was different. Guarded. "Hey," he said gently, holding 2 coffees. "I thought you might. Why are you doing this?" she asked flatly. He paused. Doing what? The groceries, the stroller, the daycare card. She held it up like a receipt for something she didn't buy. "What exactly are you trying to fix?" Shaun frowned. "I wasn't trying to fix anything. You think I can't handle my own life? No, that's not what You think because I let you carry a stroller once, I've given you a license to run my world?" Shaun exhaled slowly. "Juliette, I just wanted to make things easier." She stepped back. "That's the thing. You want to make things easier. On your terms. Without asking." There was a long silence. Then she added, quieter, "I've had this before. Men showing up with solutions. And all they wanted was a place to be a hero. I'm not trying to be a hero." She looked at him then, and her voice cracked just a little. "I'm not your redemption arc, Shaun. I'm a mother. I've built this life inch by inch. With dignity. Don't hand me polished shortcuts and expect me to smile." He swallowed hard. "I thought I was helping. Then you don't understand me at all." Juliette handed back the daycare card and closed the door. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was heavy. Shaun stood in the hallway for a full minute, coffee still in hand. He didn't knock again. That night, Juliette sat on the floor of her apartment, holding Lila against her chest. The little girl tugged at her necklace, her sleepy eyes still wide open. Juliette whispered, "I'm sorry, baby. Mama messed up again." But deep down, she wasn't sure who she was apologizing to. Across town, Shaun poured himself a drink he didn't want. He stared at the daycare card on his desk. He hadn't meant to offend her. But the truth was, this wasn't about charity. It was about not knowing what to do with feelings that didn't fit in spreadsheets. Juliette had stepped into his life like a gust of clean air, and now he didn't know how to breathe without her. But he had rushed. And he had treated her like something to preserve, not like someone who'd fought battles he couldn't even name. 3 days passed. No messages. No coffee. No laughter. The apartment felt smaller. Colder. Even Lila stopped reaching toward the door. On the 4th night, Juliette worked late at the community child care center. The job wasn't glamorous, but it kept the lights on. She wiped down the tiny tables with practiced hands, humming to herself as the last of the toddlers were picked up. The director poked her head in. "Juliette, there's someone waiting outside for you." She frowned. "It's almost 10. I think you'll want to see him." Juliette stepped out into the dim parking lot, rain misting down in soft silver strands. Shaun stood beside a rusted chain-link fence, no umbrella, no driver, no suit. Just him. And a folded note in his hand. She approached slowly. "I told you not to bring any more cards," she said. "It's not a card," he replied. He held it out. She opened it. Inside was a crayon drawing. A baby, a tall man with messy hair, and a woman with her arms crossed. Beneath it, written in uneven block letters, "I miss you." Juliette stared. "You didn't draw this." "I bribed your daughter with a banana to scribble over it." Despite herself, she smiled. "Just a little." He stepped closer. "I messed up. I tried to solve you like a problem. You're not. You're the best part of my week. And I didn't ask what you needed. I just assumed." Juliette looked down. "I don't want to save you," he said softly. "I just want to stand next to you. Even if we're standing in the rain." The rain hit harder now. And still, he didn't move. Juliette closed her eyes. Lila, fast asleep inside, would be up again at sunrise. The bills would still be due. The work wouldn't get easier. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. Okay, she said finally. Okay. No strollers. No prepaid anything. She pointed a finger. You show up. You stay present. That's it. He nodded. I can do that. And, she added, you're buying the next round of coffee. He almost laughed. Deal. The rain didn't stop, but something else did. The guilt. The edge. The need to impress. Shaun stopped bringing anything but himself. And that, it turned out, was what made the difference. He started coming by without warning. Never late, never early. Just when the world seemed too quiet and the baby had finished her bottle and Juliette had just enough left in her to smile. Sometimes they didn't even talk. Sometimes they just existed. Side by side. One evening after Juliette's shift, Shaun offered to walk her home. She almost said no, out of habit, out of pride. But Lila was fussing and the city felt darker than usual. So she said nothing. Just nodded. They didn't hold hands. They didn't flirt. She pushed the stroller and he walked beside her like a silent bodyguard with no assignment, just a man who didn't want her walking alone. As they crossed the street, Lila let out a tiny giggle. Shaun looked over. She does that sometimes when the wind changes, Juliette said, half apologetic. Like it tickles her. Shaun smiled. She's always watching the world, isn't she? She notices what adults don't. That's not a bad trait. Juliette paused at the curb, checking for traffic. She gets it from me. He didn't argue. That night, over microwave soup and peanut butter toast, Juliette leaned against the kitchen counter and asked him something no one had in a long time. Do you ever miss being no one? Shaun looked up from his half-eaten soup. No one. You know. A guy in a hoodie. Someone who doesn't make headlines just by showing up. He thought for a long time. Sometimes I don't even remember who that guy was. She sipped her tea. Maybe you're becoming him again. Shaun tilted his head. You say that like it's a good thing. Juliette met his eyes. It is. One weekend, he asked if she and Lila wanted to go somewhere different. Somewhere free, he promised. No strings. No velvet ropes. They ended up at the botanical gardens. Juliette carried Lila in a sling across her chest while Shaun read signs about rare orchids with the fascination of a man who'd never read for pleasure before. At one point, Lila reached out and grabbed a fern leaf, soft and green and trembling. Juliette laughed. She thinks it's food. She's not wrong, Shaun said. That's basically how I eat salad. Juliette raised an eyebrow. Wait, you eat salad? He smirked. You'd be amazed what CEOs do when they're bored in meetings. They sat on a bench near the koi pond, watching the fish flick through golden water. She's happy, Shaun said, glancing at Lila. She's safe, Juliette replied. He turned to her. You made that true. At the community center, Juliette worked her usual night shifts. But something changed there too. Her coworkers noticed. You're humming again, said Tara, the other evening cleaner. Am I? Don't play dumb. You have that look. What look? Tara smirked. The look of someone who's finally being looked at like she matters. Juliette rolled her eyes. But the blush said everything. That Friday, Shaun came by late. Not with coffee. Not with baby books. With a question. Come with me. Juliette blinked. Where? Just trust me. She hesitated, but Lila was asleep and Tara had offered to stay until midnight. Fine. But if this turns into some rooftop helicopter ride, I'm kicking you. No helicopters. They ended up walking through the city. No plans. Just legs moving. And then, without quite meaning to, they found themselves back where it all started. That corner. That puddle. That exact stretch of curb. Juliette stared at it. You remembered? I never forgot. She laughed softly. I was soaked. You looked terrified. I was, Shaun admitted. Not of me. No, he said. Of what I saw in you. Because it didn't look broken. It looked like something I couldn't buy or manage or predict. Juliette crossed her arms. You're really bad at compliments, you know? Shaun smiled. I'm getting better. She looked away. The puddle was still there, just smaller. The streetlight flickered overhead. Why did you bring me here? She asked. Because I wanted to stand in the one place where I realized I didn't want to be alone anymore. Juliette blinked. Then whispered, That's a terrible line. Yeah, he said. But it's true. She stepped toward him, close enough to feel the chill in his coat. Close enough to smell the rain on his skin. You're not alone now, she said. Shaun closed his eyes. And for the first time in years, the city didn't feel quite so heavy. Later, they sat in his parked car near her building. Lila still asleep inside, the heater humming softly. Shaun looked over at Juliette. I want to be part of your life. For real. Not just the parts that are convenient for me. Juliette met his gaze. Then show up. Even when it's hard. Even when I don't make it easy. He nodded. And meant it. The next morning came gray and slow. Juliette was running late. Lila had knocked over her breakfast, the elevator was broken again, and the strap on her diaper bag had finally given out. She sighed, clutching everything in one arm while trying to juggle her phone in the other. Tara, ever the lifesaver, appeared in the hallway with an extra bag and a granola bar. You're a saint, Juliette muttered, stuffing the bottle into the new bag. You're a mess, Tara said fondly. But like a determined, somehow glowing mess. Juliette rolled her eyes and ran for the bus. She didn't notice the dark SUV parked at the corner. Didn't notice the man in the front seat staring down at his hands, debating 100 ways to fix things and rejecting 99 of them. Shaun had stood outside the community center for 2 nights now. He hadn't knocked. Hadn't sent flowers. Hadn't called. He didn't want to overwhelm her again. But that morning he couldn't stay away. So he walked inside. No suit. No umbrella. No press. Just him. The receptionist blinked. Can I help you? I'm looking for Juliette Shade. She's in the multipurpose room. With the kids. Shaun nodded, heart-thudding. Thank you. He found her crouched on the floor, helping a toddler press paint-covered hands onto a sheet of paper. Her hair was in a loose bun, sleeves rolled up, a smudge of green streaked across her cheek. She was radiant in the way that real things are, not polished, not perfect, but present. Rooted. Alive. Lila sat on a mat nearby, playing with a softball, her tiny legs kicking. Shaun stood at the doorway, watching. Juliette looked up. Froze. Their eyes locked. She stood slowly, wiping her hands on a towel. What are you doing here? She asked, not unkindly but with caution. I needed to see you. Why now? Because I got tired of rehearsing apologies you don't need. Juliette crossed her arms. Then what do I need? He stepped closer. His voice dropped. You need someone who doesn't disappear when you say no. Someone who doesn't flinch when things get messy. Someone who sees you, really sees you, and doesn't try to rearrange the picture. Juliette blinked. Her throat tightened. Shaun continued, I came here because this is your world. And I'm not afraid of it. I don't want to save you from it. I want to step inside it if you'll have me. She looked at him, studying the man behind the words. No corporate mask. No safety net. Just a soaked memory and something fragile he was finally offering with open hands. Juliette didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned to Lila. Baby, she said softly. You remember our friend? Lila looked up. Her eyes widened. Then, without hesitation, she stretched her arms toward Shaun. Shaun's breath caught. Juliette stepped aside. Take her, she said gently. He did, unsure, careful. Lila's tiny body nestled against his chest like it belonged there. She cooed, then promptly pulled his tie loose. Juliette laughed. So did Shaun. It was the sound of something broken, mending. Later that night, they sat in Juliette's apartment. Shaun helped chop carrots. Juliette stirred something on the stove. Lila babbled on a blanket in the living room, surrounded by plastic cups and building blocks. The TV played soft jazz. The lamp buzzed faintly. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home. Shaun glanced over. Do you ever think, he said, that the best parts of life don't photograph well? Juliette raised an eyebrow. You mean, like carrots and spit up and a kitchen that smells like garlic? Exactly. She smiled. Then yes. Those are my favorite parts. He leaned against the counter. I have a board meeting tomorrow, he said. They want me to finalize the downtown deal. Juliette nodded. Big tower, right? He nodded back. Yeah, but I'm thinking of delaying. I want to invest in something else first. She narrowed her eyes. If you say me, I'm throwing the spoon at your head. He grinned. No, I meant a children's program at the center. Arts and after-school care. No strings attached. Juliette tilted her head. You're not buying points, are you? Not this time. She paused. Then, all right, but you're helping clean up finger paint. I'll even wear the smock. At bedtime, Shaun helped put Lila down for the first time. She grabbed his finger. Didn't let go. Juliette stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes soft. She's never done that before, she whispered. Shaun looked over his shoulder. Neither have I. They didn't kiss that night. They didn't fall into each other like in movies. They cleaned the kitchen, shared tea, listened to the rain. And when he left, she watched from the window as he stepped into the night without looking back, because he didn't need to. He knew he'd be back. It started with a puddle, but it didn't end there. Shaun stopped using his driver. Not because he couldn't afford one, but because he liked walking now. Because walking meant time, stillness, space to think. Sometimes he walked to the community center just to watch the kids paint through the window. Sometimes he walked to Juliette's without warning just to bring her cinnamon buns from the corner bakery. Are these a bribe? She asked once, licking frosting off her finger. No, he said. They're a thank you. For not giving up on me. She looked at him, unreadable. Then quietly replied, you gave me no reason to. Lila started calling him Shah. Not Daddy. Not Mister. Just Shah, the way toddlers do when they trust you without needing a definition. Shaun cried the first time she said it. Juliette pretended not to notice. But she slipped her hand into his that night while they watched cartoons and didn't let go. Weeks passed. No one came knocking. No headlines. No scandals. Because sometimes the biggest stories are the ones no one sees. Shaun's world changed shape. He still ran board meetings. Still signed contracts. Still solved problems faster than most people could name them. But now he did it with a crayon drawing tucked inside his wallet, 3 stick figures beneath a rain cloud, smiling. Lila. Juliette. Him. And under it, in block letters, our spot. One evening, Juliette came home to find the apartment full of warmth, garlic, rosemary, vanilla. Shaun stood at the stove in her apron. Lila sat on the counter wearing a colander like a crown. Juliette laughed. What is this? Dinner, Shaun said. Sort of. Lila clapped. Shaun make noodles. You're letting my child lie to me now? Artistic interpretation, he said, grinning. After dinner, they sat on the floor. Lila fell asleep in Shaun's lap, a crayon still clutched in one hand. Juliette leaned against his shoulder. This is what I never thought I'd get, she said softly. What? He asked. A safe kind of love. One that doesn't roar. One that stays. Shaun kissed her temple. I never thought I'd be able to give that. They didn't need to say more. Because both of them already knew. The world doesn't owe anyone rescue. But it does give us moments, soaked in rain, wrapped in silence, where everything can begin again. The following week, Shaun invited Juliette and Lila to a gala. She almost said no. Fancy events made her nervous. The dress code, the cameras, the looks. But he shook his head. No press. No pressure. Just presence. So she wore a navy blue dress. Nothing shiny. Nothing designer. Just hers. He wore the same black coat from the night they met. And Lila? Lila wore a clip-on bow and proudly carried a juice box in her purse. They walked in together not as the CEO and his date, but as a man, a woman, and a child who had once met at the edge of a puddle. People turned. Some whispered. Some smiled. But Juliette didn't hear them. She only heard Lila's laugh as she pointed to a chandelier and said, "It's raining upside down." Shaun looked over. And Juliette smiled. That's what happens when you stop being afraid of the rain. They didn't stay long. Just long enough for one photo. Not staged. Not posed. The three of them standing together, a little off-center, Lila holding both their hands. Later, that photo would live on the fridge next to a scribbled pancake drawing and a magnet that said "You are enough." Because they were. One Sunday morning, Juliette stepped outside with a cup of tea. Shaun sat on the steps with Lila, helping her bury something in the garden. She raised an eyebrow. "What are you two up to now?" "Secret mission," Shaun said. Lila beamed. "Treasure." Juliette walked over and crouched beside them. Buried beneath the dirt. A plastic baby bottle. A tiny pink blanket. And a paper taped to a toy car with a single word scrawled across it in bright purple crayon. Beginning. Juliette swallowed hard. "You okay?" Shaun asked gently. She nodded. Then whispered, "Yeah, I'm home." That night, as fairy lights blinked along the windowsill and the world quieted around them, Shaun pulled her close. "You know," he murmured, "I used to think second chances were a myth." Juliette smiled against his chest. "You didn't get one," she said. "You made one." He kissed her, slow and steady, not with urgency, but with certainty. And inside the house, Lila murmured in her sleep, "Shaste." There were no headlines the next day. No photographers. No hashtags. Just three people. One small apartment. And the sound of rain outside, gentle this time. And on the fridge, one last drawing. 3 stick figures. Labeled. Me. Mama. Sha. With a smiley face over the puddle. And in the corner, written in block letters, "The end. For real this time."
Bye, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.